Okay, you've probably heard the stories. Secret Antarctic bases, lost wonder weapons, and of course, Nazi flying saucers powered by some kind of terrifying otherworldly tech. It's honestly one of the wildest, most persistent legends of the 20th century. But here's the real question. Is any of it actually true?
So let's just dive right in. Did the Nazis really build flying saucers? I mean, for decades, this story has completely captivated people. This idea that right on the brink of defeat, the Third Reich was secretly churning out these incredible, high-performance circular aircraft. And the legend itself is pure sci-fi gold. You know, it's got all the good stuff. Last-ditch superweapon projects, scientists spirited away to hidden bases in Antarctica, a secret fleet of saucers just waiting for the right moment to return. Some versions of the story even have these things turning into interstellar spaceships. It's an almost unbelievable story.
Well, that's just it. It is a story. And like all great legends, it has an origin. The real history here isn't actually about secret technology. It's about how a modern myth gets built from the ground up. And to really get it, we have to go back to the final, really chaotic years of World War II. See, the whole idea of Nazi flying saucers didn't just appear out of thin air. It grew from two very real ingredients: genuinely advanced German weaponry on one hand, and some genuinely strange wartime mysteries on the other.
To understand how this all started, you gotta picture two things happening at the exact same time. First, you've got Allied intelligence just being flooded with reports about German wonder weapons, and some of them, like the V-1 and V-2 rockets or that futuristic-looking Horton Ho 229 flying wing, were terrifyingly real. At the same time, Allied pilots on these really stressful night missions were reporting something else, something weird, mysterious glowing orbs that would just follow their planes. They ended up nicknaming them Foo Fighters. And look, this wasn't just pilots whispering in the barracks. This was a genuine mystery, so widespread that major magazines were writing articles about the Foo Fighter mystery just months after the war ended. So the public was already primed to believe that strange things were up in the sky and that maybe, just maybe, the Germans had built them.
Okay, so after the war, you've got this whole Foo Fighter mystery just kind of simmering in the background. And then, in 1947, the entire thing just explodes into the mainstream consciousness.
The summer of 1947. This is it. This is the year the modern UFO era really begins. A pilot named Kenneth Arnold has his famous sighting over Mount Rainier, and suddenly the entire country is gripped by a nationwide wave of flying disc sightings. And of course, everyone was asking the exact same question. What are these things?
And what's so fascinating is that a very popular theory popped up almost immediately. And honestly, it seemed pretty logical at the time. The war was fresh in everyone's memory. People knew about Operation Paperclip and all the captured German scientists and their advanced projects. So for a lot of people, including some in the military, it seemed totally plausible that these saucers were real weapons built from captured Nazi plans. It was an earthly and kind of believable explanation.
But a theory like that needed one more thing to really take off: an inventor. And so, in the 1950s, as the UFO craze just kept going, a whole parade of men started stepping forward, each one ready to take the credit.
One of the first, and maybe the most credible, was an Italian guy named Giuseppe Belluzzo. Now, he wasn't just some random person. He was a world-renowned expert on turbines and a former government minister for Italy. In March 1950, he tells a major Italian newspaper that, yeah, the saucers are real, and they're based on an Italian design from 1942 that was later passed to the Germans. His credentials gave the story a huge, huge boost of legitimacy.
Well, Belluzzo's story pretty much opened the floodgates. Almost right away, a German pilot named Rudolf Schriever came forward in Germany's Der Spiegel magazine. He claimed he had designed a circular jet helicopter, but, and here's the good part, his plans were stolen from his workshop right at the end of the war. Now, unlike Belluzzo, Schriever wasn't an engineer, but man, his story about stolen plans was just so dramatic and compelling. Then, in 1952, the French press introduces us to a new character, Richard Meath. He supposedly built an enormous 42-meter supersonic saucer called the V-7. The thing about Meath, though, is that he's basically a phantom.
Other than a few sensational newspaper articles and, I kid you not, a supposed photo of him in a bathing suit, there is zero historical record that this guy ever even existed. And the story just kept snowballing from there. It wasn't just those three. You had dozens of others coming out of the woodwork. There was a physicist who said his designs were nabbed by the Soviets, a former captain with these wild tales of 5 saucers hidden down in Antarctica. There was even a jailed spy in Brazil who tried to trade his saucer secrets to get out of prison. Every single claimant had a different, totally contradictory story, and the media just ate it up. So at this point, you've just got this messy, confusing cloud of claims all floating around. For the legend to really become what it is today, someone had to step in, connect all the dots, and turn this chaos into a single, coherent story. And you can really see the myth solidifying in 3 key steps. It kicks off in 1950, with all that media buzz from the competing claims by Beluzzo and Schriever. Then comes the crucial moment. In 1953, an engineer named George Klein very cleverly positions himself as the chief who oversaw everybody, Beluzzo, Schriever, even the mysterious Meath. He basically invents a chain of command after the fact. The final step was in 1956, when an author named Rudolf Lusar included these saucer stories in his book on secret weapons. That moved the legend out of the tabloids and into what looked like a serious history book. George Klein was really the myth's great editor. He's the one who cleaned everything up, assigned everyone a role, and created this idea of a single, unified saucer program. And he could do it without anyone contradicting him. Why? Well, because by then, Beluzzo and Schriever were dead, and Meath probably never existed in the first place. The stage was all his. He even started misspelling Beluzzo's name as Belonzo, a little error that, believe it or not, would get repeated by believers for decades to come. So once this cleaned up, historical version of the myth was established and put into a book, it was ready for its final transformation, from a fringe conspiracy theory into a full-blown pop culture staple. And really, the legacy is everywhere once you start looking for it. The idea has fueled endless books and theories. It's basically the direct ancestor of the whole Nazi zombie horror genre. It's inspired movies from the silly and satirical, like Iron Sky, to the more serious. That whole sci-fi trope of secret Nazi bases on the moon or in Antarctica? Yep, it comes from here. It's just such a powerful narrative that it continues to inspire fiction even today. So when you get right down to it, the truth behind Nazi UFOs has basically nothing to do with secret technology. It's a history of myth-making. It's the perfect case study in how a legend gets built. You start with a little grain of truth, the real German tech, you add a big dose of public anxiety, mix in a few opportunists looking for fame or money, and then you just fuel the whole thing with media excitement. The pattern is pretty clear, right? Real events get tangled up with speculation, and then someone comes along and shapes it all into a really compelling story. And once you see how this myth was built, you kind of start to see that same pattern everywhere. Which leaves us with one last really crucial question. What other stories that we just take for granted were built in the exact same way?